Hello everyone, welcome to the live session, extra live session for Introduction to History of Architecture of India. The course instructor for this course is Professor Pushkar Sohoni from IISER Pune. I am Shreya Shukla and I am the NPTEL PM, NPTEL TA for this course, where I do some previous year questions. I give answers and explanation of some previous year questions to help you with the course. Uh, we have done 4 live sessions for this course so far, and corresponding to each week, and in each live session the assignments of previous weeks were discussed. So this is an extra live session in which I have compiled 4 or 5 questions from each week into this whole session. So again today we will have 20 questions today to do, 4 or 5 questions from each week, all the 4 weeks. And let's wait for 5 minutes for other people to join, and we will start in 5 minutes. So we have waited for 5 minutes. Others can join in between. So again, welcome to everyone who joined a little later. So welcome to the live session for Introduction to History of Architecture in India. This is a course by Professor Pushkar Sohoni from IISER Pune, and I am Shreya Shukla. I am currently doing PhD at IIT Roorkee, and I am the NPTEL TA for this course, in which we are supposed to do previous year questions and give explanations of those questions. So we have done 4 weeks of 4 live sessions corresponding to each week of courses. This extra live session, I have compiled questions from all the 4 weeks, and there are total 20 questions, 4 or 5 questions from each week, and we would do that, and then we can have the question and answer round just like we do in all the sessions. So without any further ado, I will start with the session now. So the course objective of this course. So this course is a brief introduction to the history of 5000 years of architecture in India. And the history of architecture in India, it is a great material narrative of aspirations, polities and societies in the region. And the course covers the trajectory from as old as Indus Valley civilization to the modernism of B.V. Doshi. And the architecture in India has had defined periods, peoples and regions across the country. So as I mentioned earlier, it was a 4-week course. So these were the points that were covered in each week. So in week 1, the lectures covered were early architecture, which was about Indus Valley civilization and others. Then Buddhist and early temple architecture. Then sacrificial altars and divine shelters, how the temple came into being. And then the Great Temple, where it was discussed the different types of temples, the Latina and Kutina temples, and Bhumaja and Shekri types of temples. And then the 5th lecture was an overview of all this. Then week 2 covered Delhi Sultanate, and then the regional sultanates that arose out of Delhi Sultanate. Then temples and mosques in that at that time. Then in detail, Daulatabad Fort was discussed, and then a week 2 overview. Then week 3 included Mughal architecture part 1, and then Mughal architecture part 2, and then imbrication of Sultanate and Maratha architecture, and then Maratha temples. Then week 3 overview. Then week 4 covered the princely states of India, and then the colonial architecture in India, which covered Indo-Saracenic architecture, Neo-Gothic architecture and other parts, and other kinds of things that Britishers brought along with them. Then the international Art Deco and modern styles occurring in India. Then architecture today, the commerce and creativity part of it, and then the review of week 4. So these were the points that were covered in this whole course, right from early architecture of Indus Valley civilization to the modernism part, and even a little has been discussed about the future of architecture. So without any further ado, we will start with week 1. So I have 5 questions from week 1, and I would start with them. So question number 1: what are the 2 main types of temple superstructures? And the answers are Latina and Kutina, Kutina and Vesara, Latina and Bhumaja, Kalinga and Kutina. So the answer is Latina and Kutina, and I would quickly explain the difference between the 2 types of temples. So Latina temple is a North Indian temple or Nagar temple. Kutina temple is a Dravidian temple or South Indian temple. Latina temple is common from above Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka in most of the North India, and Kutina temple is common from Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh to the south of it. So in Latina temple, it has multi-storied pavilions. Again, there is Vedi, which is the base or the symbolizes sacrificial altar, and then we have multi-story pavilions in the Shekhar of this temple, and each multi-story represents a set of houses. And Uttar Vedi is a small sacrificial altar, like each multi-story pavilion that goes up in the some height, and then we have a small sacrificial altar which is called the Uttar Vedi, and so Uttar Vedi is at the top of the Shikra, and Vedi is at the bottom of the Shikra, and then on that Uttar Vedi sits the dome, which is a ribbed solid dome called Amlaka, and it is called a Latina temple. It comes from Lata because this kind of temple, it looks compressed because this temple has strong vertical lines, and these vertical lines resemble the creepers or the Lata. That's why it's called a Latina temple. Whereas in Kutina temple, the name comes from Kutas meaning being hut. Kutina comes from Kuta. So again, the idea is very similar, that there would be multi-storied pavilions. But in case of Kutina temple, it's a multi-storied palace which is made up of small aedicules of huts. So each story will have small huts, and the longitudinal huts are called shalas, and the square ones are called kutas. So each story of a kutira temple will have alternate or a combination or a permutation of kutas and shalas. So this is the main difference between Latina temple and Kutina temple. And in a Kutina temple, on the top, instead of a dome or an amlaka, there is a bigger hut. So these are the main differences between Latina temple and Kutina temple. Both have multi-storied structures, but in Latina temple, there are more vertical bands, and then there is ribbed solid dome on the top of it. In Kutina temple, each floor has small permutation or combinations of kutas and shalas, and on the top there is a small hut instead of an amlaka. So our answer is Latina and Kutina. Question number 2. The earliest extant of freestanding temple is in Sachi, and it is known as excuse me, Temple 17 from the early 5th century CE, Temple 30 from the 8th century CE, Temple 64 from 500 BCE, and Viruksha temple from 200 CE. First of all, this way of writing date CE and BCE is corresponding to AD and BC. So here the terms AD and BC, because AD symbolizes Anno Domini, that is after the death of the Christ, and then BC is before Christ. So instead of a term that is connotating to one specific religion, these terms have been derived to make it more secular in the vast knowledge of academics. So that's why the term BCE and CE are used. CE is Common Era, which is corresponding to the dates of AD, and BCE is before Common Era, which corresponds to the BC terms. So these are to avoid the confusion in dates, just the terms have been changed to make it more secular term, so that in academics, rather than corresponding to one specific religion. So CE is corresponding to AD and BCE is corresponding to BC. So the answer is Temple 17. So a few facts about the Temple 17 at Sachi Stupa complex. So it was constructed in 5th century AD, and Gupta temple, also known as temple number 17, it is situated on the southeast side of the great stupa of Sachi. Most scholars agree that the temple was used for Buddhist worship. While temple building in Buddhism didn't gain popularity, many of the elements of this temple would go on to incorporate into Hindu temple architecture. Temple number 17 is an early temple of the Gupta period and is an excellent example of simplicity and grandeur. This temple has a simple flat roof sanctum with a porch that has 4 pillars in the front. The ceiling of the sanctum is slightly higher than the roof of the portico or the hall. The interior and exterior of the temple are undecorated, but the pillars are carved. They are carved with inverted lotuses, while the capital which supports the roof is carved with small lions. The temple represents one of the earliest known examples of temple architecture in India. And Temple 17 represents a Hindu temple in its most primordial form, which before the great temples that will evolve out of this over the next 100 years. So the case here is that this temple is located in the Sachi Stupa complex. It is believed to be a Buddhist temple, but the temple worshipping did not carry on in the Buddhism religion. So this did not catch up with that. However, this idea of temple worshipping or temple building caught on with the idea of developed into the idea of these grand Hindu temples that we see today. So this is called, or this is thought of to be the most primordial or form of Hindu temple in its form, where there is a front porch and there is another hall behind it, which will house the deity. So yeah, so the answer is Temple 17 from the 5th century CE. Just to tell you, CE is AD, BCE is BC. Third, in Western India, particularly Gujarat, Western Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, a unique type of temple superstructure was the Kalinga, Shekri, Bhumija or Famsana. So the answer is Bhumija, and I would quickly explain what is Bhumija type of temple. So Bhumija is a type of Latina temple, and the Bhumija type is a temple on a plinth with lots of projections in plan. Amlaka on top and central bands are marked by elaborate carving on all sides. In between, you have a number of small stories with aedicules of Shikhra built up. They have a mandapa in front with a roof perhaps of a completely different type. And you have horizontal bands which are marked off by these vertical latas. This is called the Bhumija type. Bhumija means being born of the ground, and these represent different bhumis of different grounds on which you have a multiplicity of shikhras. The Bhumija is primarily found in Western India, in southern Rajasthan, Western Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. So Latina temples are considered to be of major classification is of two types, Bhumija and Shekhari. So the major difference in these Latina temples of Shekhari and Bhumija is that in Bhumija you have again different levels, and each different level is considered to be a different ground. Bhumija comes from word bhumi. Bhumi means ground in Hindi and Sanskrit. So each of these floors have small shikhars, aedicules of small shikhars. So aedicule word basically means a miniature version of something. So like we saw in the Kutina temple, that each floor had aedicules of huts in longitudinal and square forms. The Bhumija temple on each floor has aedicules of small shikhras, as you can see in this image. Also, you can see the vertical line coming from top to bottom, which is the uh, representation of the lata or the creeper, hence the name Latina temple. And the other type of Latina temple is the Shekhri type, and in the Shekhri type there is one major shikhar, and then there are cascading shikhars all around it. So these two are the different types of Latina temple that exist in the North India part. Bhumija type temple exists on the western part of India in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So our answer is Bhumija. Question number 4. The earliest excavated cave architecture in India dates to 1000 to 500 BCE, 300 to 200 BCE, 100 to 200 CE, 200 to 500 CE. So the earliest excavated cave architecture in India has been found in Barabar Hills in Jahanabad district in Bihar. It is home to the world's oldest surviving caves, and it is a rare historical site today that has become an international tourist destination. These ancient rock cut chambers date back to 3rd century BCE, which means 300 BCE. Renowned as the place of origin of Ajivika sect, uh, they there are multiple caves with different kinds of openings, and this building signifies rock cut architecture, an idea which seems to have come from the western end of Asia through the Achaemenid Empire into India in Bihar. So Achaemenid Empire, the empire of the ancient Greeks. No, Achaemenid Empire was the older Persian Empire. So the Mauryan Empire, in India we see a lot of parts of Achaemenid Empire, lots of architectural ideas which have been borrowed from the Achaemenid Empire, in which one of the ideas that have been borrowed is the stone cut architecture, which was very prevalent in the Achaemenid Empire, and we see this in India, and the oldest record is the 3rd century BCE, 300 BCE. So it was not seen before in India what has been seen here, and there's a possibility that this idea has come through western end of Asia from Achaemenid Empire, the old Persian Empire. So our answer is 300 to 200 BCE. It dates back to 3rd century BCE. Question number 5. One image has been provided and you have been asked to identify which building is this. So this is options are Sanchi Stupa, 2nd BC, 2nd century BCE, Delhi Stupa, 2nd century BCE, Nagarjul Konda Stupa, 2nd century BCE, Kangahalli Stupa, 2nd century BCE. So the answer is this is Sanchi Stupa, which is located in Madhya Pradesh right now, and yeah, this is Sanchi Stupa, 2nd century BCE. Now coming to week 2, these are the 5 questions that I have added from week 1. Now we will come to week 2 questions. Question number 1. The architecture of Sultanate of Bengal is characterized by the use of brick, stone, timber, or all of the above. So Bengal Sultanate was a sovereign state that encompassed present-day Bangladesh, Indian state of West Bengal, and the Myanmarese state of Rakhine between the 14th and 16th century. The Bengal Sultanate arose after the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq and the Tughlaq dynasty. So, lots of sultanates arose in India after they got their independence from the ruling Delhi Sultanate dynasties. So Bengal Sultanate was one of those parts. So the Bengal Sultanates, they primarily used brick as the construction material because so pre-Islamic buildings in this region were constructed out of brick only because uh, mud or clay was available in abundance, and it was easy to create architecture with that. So pre-Islamic buildings were always made of this, and during the Islamic rule, so Islamic rule basically showed they used stone in their architecture more. Stone were considered royal and stone was considered important. But in Bengal Sultanate, even during the Islamic era, bricks were used because stone had to be imported. There was not stone available in Bengal at that time. So it had to be imported, but clay was plentiful, so clay bricks could be made easily. So the stone that they could import from the other parts of the country, they use those stones in areas of importance for prominent details, for sometimes arches or some specific detail or other parts, while the entire architecture was constructed in brick because that was what was available to them in that area. This is how regionalism affects the architecture in different areas. So yeah, the answer is brick. The architecture of Bengal Sultanate is characterized by the use of brick. Although Sultanate architecture all over the country was characterized by the use of stones, but because Bengal had to import that stone and they didn't have that stone there, and so they used only the stone for important details or column details or other parts. However, the entire architecture, all the mosques and other kinds of buildings were built out of clay bricks. Question number 2. The fort of Bidar was built by Sultans of Gujarat, Sultans of Bijapur, Bahmani Sultans, Kings of Vijayanagar. So Bidar Fort is located in the old city area of Bidar, Karnataka. Bidar was the capital of Bahmani kingdom in the 14th century. The fort was built by Ahmad Shah Wali Bahmani as he shifted his capital from Kalaburagi, Gulbarg to Bidar. He built his fort along with several Islamic monuments. There are over 30 monuments inside Bidar Fort. Bidar Fort is considered as one of the most formidable forts of the country, and Bidar city was distinctly planned and built. The main citadel complex housed the royal palaces, mahals, and mosques, and adjoining to this on the southern side, the city was built for the people. The Bidar Fort has stood witness to a lot of historical milestones: the rise and fall of Bahmani dynasty, the rise and separation of the 5 Deccan sultans, capture by the Barit Shahi and Adil Shahi dynasties, and finally being won by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb in the blockade of Bidar in 1657. The complex was put up by UNESCO on its tentative list to become a World Heritage Site in 2014 with others in the region under the name Monuments and Forts of the Deccan Sultanate. So the answer is Bahmani Sultans. The fort of Bidar was built by the Bahmani Sultans. It was established by Ahmad Shah Bahmani. Question number 3. The Chand Minar was built in Delhi, Bidar, Daulatabad or Golconda. So this is what Chand Minar looks like. Chand Minar or the Tower of the Moon as translated in English. It is a medieval tower in Daulatabad, India. The tower is located in the state of Maharashtra near the Daulatabad Deogiri Fort complex. It was erected in 1445 CE by King Alauddin Bahmani to commemorate his capture of the fort. Char Minar bears resemblance to the Qutub Minar of Delhi and was inspired from it. And it is considered to be among the finest specimens of Indo-Islamic architecture in southern India, specifically because it has these chhajjas you can see in the image. You have a protruded balcony like structure, and then you have chhajjas, and the minaret is a Islamic architecture type. So this is a prime example of Indo-Islamic architecture because we have a minaret with chhajjas in it. It is 63 meters high and it is divided into 4 stories and 24 chambers. A small mosque or praying hall sits at the base of the tower, which is covered with Persian blue tiles. And the tower also displays some indigenous Indian architectural features such as the brackets, what I am talking about, the brackets in the chhajjas supporting its balconies. The tower's height makes it visible from every corner of the Daulatabad fort. So Chand Minar is located in Daulatabad. It was erected there by Alauddin Bahmani when he captured the fort of Daulatabad, and it is 63 meters high. It was inspired from Qutub Minar, and it is a fine specimen of Indo-Islamic architecture because it has these brackets or the under the protruded balconies from it. So yeah, so the answer is Daulatabad. Chand Minar was built in Daulatabad. Question number 4. The water distribution technologies of the sultanates. Number A, allowed the cities to be sited far away from flowing water. B, comprised of pipes and conduits. C, used imported technologies like qanats. And D, all of the above. Just a second. Indian cities were usually the pre-Islamic cities in India. They were always built along the river banks because our cities, we needed to have a perennial source of water around us. So the cities were always built near river banks or a source of water. So when the sultanates came to India, they brought their technologies or their systems from along with them, in which helped them build cities in places far away from the water sources because they had technologies which could have carried the water from the water source to the city area. So the technology by the sultanates at the water systems which allowed them to build cities in places where you could have never imagined them. They built massive artificial reservoirs with a number of palace buildings on its site. So they brought the idea of building artificial reservoirs to India, and they would build artificial reservoirs like lakes and other things, and use and build palaces around it and use that water. They also brought with them what is called the Persian wheel, by which you can harvest water, and a gear transforms the circular laborious movement of a pair of oxen into a vertical wheel so that the water can be pulled out. So they also brought the concept of Persian wheel with them, in which the ox moves and the wheel takes out the water in a vertical wheel, takes out the water from that as the ox moves. In Gujarat, the sultans of Gujarat in the 15th century built Hauze Qutub, which is now called Kankaria Lake. Kankaria Lake is very famous right now in Ahmedabad. A perfect circular water body in which the water sluices you see on the further side, which would channel in water. A whole system of hydrology was understood where water would collect have it naturally channel itself into the depression in low-lying areas, and how it could be tapped to fill up great reservoirs, and how from these reservoirs the water will be distributed through a network of underground pipes into the settlements that the sultans built. So Kankaria Lake, which was built by Hosei Qutb, uh, was a perfect circular reservoir which was built, and then they laid out very strategically. They found the place where to build this in the low-lying areas, and then underground pipes would carry the water into the net cities of the sultanates. The other system that was brought over, particularly from Iran, was the system of what are called qanats. When you tap into higher water table, quite a distance away, maybe 12 to 15 kilometer away, and create a horizontal tunnel with a very mild slope punctuated by vertical shafts, which will bring the water continuously and perennially to areas that you desire a water supply. So in qanats, what happens is, on in a slopy area, uh, this this area might have a higher water table. So from this area to the other area which does not have a higher water table, you create a horizontal tunnel which is supported by vertical shafts, and that tunnel brings the water down. So the answer is all of the above. The water distribution technologies of the sultanates allowed them to build cities away from the flowing water. Second, it comprised of pipes and conduits. Third, they use imported technologies like qanats, which was imported from Iran. So the answer is all of the above. Question number 5. This picture has been given and you have been asked to identify the uh, mosque. So options are given: Jami Mosque Ahmedabad, Jami Mosque Delhi, Jami Mosque Daulatabad, Jami Mosque Gulbarg. The answer is Jami Mosque Ahmedabad. Um, this also is a famous mosque because the intrications in the walls of this mosque has Kalptaru, the tree detailings, and in other intricate details over there. Moving to week 3. Question number 1. The architecture of the late Mughals is characterized by chhatris or kiosks, Bangla roofed pavilions, baluster columns, all of the above. So, Shah Jahan was considered as one of the greatest Mughal builders, and he is credited with building the Taj Mahal, a brand new city in Delhi called which he called Shah Jahanabad. And he did not sit on a throne which was like a seat, but really a throne which was a platform called the Takht. Above this platform, he built this curvilinear roof, which would be called Bangla roof because it resembled to the thatch roof found in Bengal region. And then Shah Jahan also built a number of buildings in the Red Fort at Agra. He built himself a whole set of pavilions, and the pavilions on either side, which have curvilinear roofs called Bangla roofs. And then Shah Jahan favors a number of new elements in his buildings, most famous of which is baluster columns. And the earliest examples of Mughal baluster columns are found in Shah Jahan's contributions to the great fortress palaces of Agra, Lahore, and Delhi. Chhatris also became a hallmark of Mughal architecture, but it became a hallmark right from the time of Akbar. So the question specifically asked the architecture of the late Mughals is characterized by. So Babur was the first one in the Mughal dynasty, and then Babur, Humayun after Humayun Akbar, and after Akbar Shah Jahan. So till Babur, Akbar, and Humayun, from Shah Jahan it is called the late Mughal era, and Shah Jahan was considered to be the greatest Mughal builder amongst all of the other people. So Shah Jahan brought in the elements of Bangla roof because he did not sit on a throne, but rather he chose to sit on a platform which is called a takht, and then that platform had Bangla roof, and he also implied Bangla roof in other parts of the forts. And he also used baluster columns, and he is baluster columns in Mughal architecture is solely seen in contribution of Shah Jahan's buildings. especially in the fortress palaces of Agra, Lahore, and Delhi. Chhatris were a hallmark of Mughal architecture, but they were there from the era of Akbar. Shah Jahan also used it. He did not, which was visible in Palace of Akbar in Ajmer. So Akbar brought in the Chhatris in Mughal architecture, while Shah Jahan brought in the Bangla roof and the baluster columns. So the answer is all of the above, because the architecture of the late Mughals is characterized by Bangla roof pavilions, baluster columns, both of which were brought by Shah Jahan, and chhatris and kiosks, which were brought in by Akbar, but Shah Jahan also implied them in his architecture. So all these three elements were a part of late Mughal architecture. Question 4. The Chehergarh refers to four gardens, a garden with four kinds of trees, a circular gardens, or a quadripartite garden. So Charbagh or Cheherbagh was brought to India by Mughals. It is a Persian style garden layout in which the main building is put in the center of quadrilateral garden, which is divided by walkways or flowing water into four smaller parts. Humayun's tomb and Taj Mahal in India are the most examples of this famous examples of this style. Babur, in his autobiography, described his interest in planning and layout formal gardens, and formal gardens and sorry, placed within rectangular walled enclosures and divided into four quarters by artificial channels. These gardens were called Cheherbagh, four gardens, because of this symmetrical division into the quarters. Just a second. Yeah, the the recorded classes are uploaded on YouTube, and you must have received the link for those for this channel. All these sessions, all the live sessions are recorded and they are uploaded on YouTube. And you might have received one email from the NPTEL people, NPTEL team. They would have sent the all the details along with the YouTube links and access to the PPTs. So this would be available online. So the answer is a quadripartite garden, which means a garden divided in four parts. So Cheherbagh or Chehergarh refers to a quadripartite garden, which was brought in by Mughals, and it is one of the most famous formal and symmetrical gardens. Question number 3. The palaces of the Rajputs and the Marathas in the 18th century were based on ancient Hindu architecture, were influenced by Mughal architecture, were based on domestic vernacular architecture, or D, none of the above. So after the Mughals, the princely states in India started building in the style of Mughals. The architectural vocabulary of the Mughals was completely replicated by the Rajputs, the Marathas, by all the kings large and small across India. But it was not always the case that the Mughal style was so widely accepted. So after the end of the Mughal Empire, the princely states in India, they started building in the style of Mughals because that was associated with royalty and power. So the Rajputs and the Marathas completely replicated the style of the Mughals. However, not all the other princely states or all the kingdoms replicated that style and accepted the Mughal style, but Rajputs and Marathas did. Also, Mughals had a whole string of cousins with the Rajputs, and the Rajputs who were their first and second cousins from the time of Akbar and Jodha onwards, as a lot of Rajput princesses grew up in the Mughal court. Similarly, a lot of Mughal princesses were sent to the Rajput court, and thus the visual vocabulary of the Mughals and Rajputs also was the same imperial architectural vocabulary. So because Mughals and Rajputs had good terms and had a good relationship with each other, and they also had a whole string of cousins, because both Rajputi princes and Mughal princesses were sent to either kingdoms. So the architectural vocabulary was also exchanged between them. The fort of Amer, which is the fort outside of Jaipur, is one of such extant example of building that shows the connection between the Rajputs and Mughals. It's a Rajput fort, but it shows a lot of similarity to the Mughal architecture. For example, the use of domes and chhatris and other baths on it. So the answer is the palaces of the Rajputs and the Marathas in the 18th century, they were influenced by the Mughal architecture. Question number 4. Identify the following. Humayun's tomb, Bibi ka Maqbara, Taj Mahal or Charminar. So this is actually Bibi ka Maqbara, which was built by Aurangzeb, and it was inspired from Taj Mahal. Then identify the following. Again, you have to identify this image, and the options given here are Alai Darwaza Fatehpur Sikri, Badshahi Mosque Lahore, Tomb of Jahangir Lahore, Mosque in the Taj Mahal Agra. So this is actually the mosque located in the Taj Mahal complex. So the answer is the mosque in the Taj Mahal complex. It is built in entirely in red sandstone with the domes built in white marble, same which has been used in the Taj Mahal. So now week 4, 5 questions more. So question number 1 from week 4, the forms of modern architecture, the basically the dynamic forms or the different architectural forms of modern architecture in India were possible because of European architectural designs, reinforced cement concrete construction, traditional technology, or the Indian nationalist movement. So, modern architecture, first of all, what is modern architecture? Modern architecture is a style and design movement characterized by simplicity, functionality, and the use of industrial materials such as steel and concrete. It emerged in the early 20th century as a response to traditional architectural styles and became popular in the aftermath of World War II. Key figures in the development of modern architecture include Le Corbusier, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Walter Gropius. The style is characterized by clean lines, an emphasis on functionality, and the use of new materials and construction techniques. So, modernism is a design movement which was characterized by simplicity and functionality rather than any other thing, and it started because of the use of industrial materials such as steel and concrete. So, rationalism and RCC, these were the two major factors which triggered the heroic period of modern architecture. Main focus was on structure and function. In modern architecture, RCC building construction became synonymous with strength and reliability. It is extensively used in the construction of high rise buildings, dynamic building shapes, bridges, dams, and other critical structures. RCC can be molded into shapes before the hardening of the mix. Then this ability of molding RCC into various shapes allowed the architects and engineers to explore innovative designs and complex geometries. RCC buildings were more durable than other buildings. RCC buildings have a long life and low maintenance cost, and RCC buildings have better resistance to fire than steel structures. So the answer is that the forms of modern architecture were possible. Modern architecture, the style and the era that started in 20th around 20th century around, the forms that arose in modern architecture, they were possible because of the use of reinforced cement concrete. So the answer is reinforced cement concrete or RCC construction. Question 2. The British built in the following architectural styles: neoclassical, neo-Gothic, Indo-Saracenic, or all of the above. So neo-Gothic style is also called Gothic revival style. It was a style that drew its inspiration from the medieval architecture and competed with the neoclassical revivals in the US and Great Britain. So, throughout the history of different architectural styles, we see that one after the other, this has been the pattern throughout the architectural styles. That once we reach a peak where we create extremely ornamented buildings, and then we come back to similar forms, and then we come back to again ornamented buildings. So this has been a pattern throughout the entire architectural styles, the trajectory. So when the terms, the architectural styles neo-Gothic or neoclassical come up, these basically means revival of the other styles. So at one point of history, neoclassical style came into being, which means that they revived the classical architecture. Here, the classical refers to the Greek and the Roman architecture. So they produced buildings inspired from the classical architecture. They used the Greek and Roman orders, Greek and Roman columns, and grandeur of scales, and then simplicity in geometric forms. And because this was architecture style was comparatively simpler in region, so to compete with it, neo Gothic came into being, which was the revival of Gothic period. And Gothic period was characterized by extreme ornamentation, pointed arches, flying buttresses, and details, Gothic windows. So, the Gothic revival or the Neo-Gothic draws inspiration from the Gothic period, and classic Neoclassic draws inspiration from the classic period, which was the architecture of Greek and Roman. And then Indo-Saracenic, this is completely specific to India, because Indo-Saracenic architecture is a amalgamation of Indo-Islamic and Indian architecture with Neo-Gothic and Neoclassical styles. So when Mughals and when the Delhi Sultanate dynasties came into India and the Mughals came into India, a new type of architecture came into being, which was the Indo-Islamic architecture, which combined the Indian regional elements with the Islamic architecture that was coming from the West. When the Britishers came into India, and then they combined their classical styles, their building styles with our existing Indo-Islamic and Indian architecture style. So Indo-Saracenic architecture is an amalgamation of Indo-Islamic Indian architecture with Neo-Gothic and Neoclassical styles. And in these buildings, usually the ornamentation or the detailings are in have borrow styles from Indo-Islamic architecture and Indian architecture, while the plans, the layouts of the buildings were typical British style. So the examples of these kinds of buildings in India are Victoria Terminus is an example of Neo-Gothic building. Indo-Saracenic architecture, the example is High Court, Hyderabad, which I have added here. You can see the building plan of High Court of Hyderabad is very British, and however, you can see the use of domes on top, red domes on top, completely takes that from Indo-Islamic architecture. Then Neoclassical style, the example, the picture I have added here is the Ripon building in Madras. This is a typical British architecture building. You see that a lot of similar style in Connaught Place in Delhi, also CP also. The use of grandeur, white color, the use of Greek and Roman columns in those buildings. So the answer is all of the above. The British built in the following architectural styles in India. They built in neoclassical styles, which was prevalent in Britain and US at that time. They built in neo-Gothic style, which again became prevalent in the West. So because they were here, they built those buildings in that style. And Indo-Saracenic style, which was an amalgamation of Indian architecture, Indo-Islamic architecture with neoclassical and neo-Gothic architecture that the British brought. So the answer is D, all of the above. The British built in all these architectural style throughout the time they were here. Question number 3. The architectural style that first tied India to an international architecture was Indo-Saracenic, Art Deco, modern or postmodern. So in the 20th century, excuse me, in the 20th century, as India increasingly became integrated with the world order of trade, commerce, and architecture, the styles of architecture that were common in Europe and America came to India. And chief among these styles were international style, Art Deco style, and the modernist style. In the 1930s, buildings tried to go higher and higher, and the architects started sculpting buildings in ways that buildings looked like unified objects. The ornament was not something applied to buildings, the building itself was considered to be an ornament. This sensibility led to the rise of a style called Art Deco, of which we have a number of examples in India, particularly in the presidency towns of Bombay and Madras. So, the idea became that the ornamentation will not be applied to the building, but the building itself would be the building itself was the ornament, and this led to the rise of style of Art Deco in India specifically. So when the world started using different international styles, different modern styles, India, the styles that came to India was international style, the Art Deco style, and the modernist styles. However, Art Deco stayed here more, and it was visible more in the presidency towns of Bombay and Madras. So, what is Art Deco? So, Art Deco is short form for French arts decoratives, and sometimes referred to as simply deco, as a style of visual arts, architecture, and product design that first appeared in France in the 1910 and flourished in the US and Europe during 1920s and early 1930s, and then it came to India. It is an eclectic form of art which combines handcrafted traditional motifs with machine made imageries. So, the idea behind Art Deco was that they would use inspiration from natural things or organic things and other parts, but they would use machine made or completely geometrical imageries. This is influenced by the previous Art Nouveau movement, which was against the machine movement of post-industrial revolution, and but the biomorphic and asymmetrical visual language of Art Nouveau was diluted, and it was rather replaced by a machine-made geometric patterns in the Art Deco movement. So Art Nouveau movement, which occurred after the post-industrial revolution. So when industrial revolution occurred, again that, like I explained in the previous question, this point came where, when industrial revolution came, mass production became easier. So all the buildings started using similar things, and it all started looking similar. All kinds of buildings started looking similar, and they would use steel and other things in their construction. So Art Nouveau movement started against it, against the machine movement of post-industrial revolution, and Art Nouveau signified the use of absolutely biomorphic forms, or the forms inspired from nature, curvy linear lines, decoration, ornamentation, and more focused on handmade stuff and uniqueness rather than machine made stuff and mass production. So this is what Art Deco was inspired by. That they took inspiration from Art Nouveau, basically using biomorphic forms. But they did not go with the absolute original or organic geometry. Rather, they went with a machine-made geometry, but which was inspired from the nature or biomorphic forms. Art Deco movement is characterized by simplicity, planarity, symmetry, and repetition of elements. And the image I have added here is of Chrysler building, and if you can see the image, you see different triangles that go up from top to bottom. These are inspired from the rays of sun. So instead of having a absolute biomorphic form, they have used geometric forms of triangles signifying the rays of sun on it. So Chrysler building is one of the most famous example of Art Deco movement. This building is located in Mumbai, and this is the New India Insurance Building, and it draws inspiration from the Egyptian elements. It was built in 1938 in Mumbai. The Art Deco in Mumbai, India, is a style. India style is a notable feature of the architecture of the city. It was used primarily for the office buildings, residences, and movie theaters during a period when India was part of the British Empire. The different symbols and designs of Art Deco movement include architectural lettering, ziggurats or zigzags, references to Indian mythology and traditions, images of gods, goddesses, and farmers were depicted, streamlining, drawn out forms and arched contours inspired by aerodynamics of trains and airplanes, eyebrows, which basically was the projection over a structure's portico to protect it from the harsh sun, or you can say chhajja, and they were called eyebrows in Art Deco terms. Nautical design, as Mumbai was a port city, and structures, so the structures, the buildings that were being created at that time, they were inspired from the architecture of ships, which means that they took streamlining into consideration. So they streamlined the buildings. They used porthole windows, which were small circular windows. They use those in the buildings. So this is what we mean by nautical design or nautical architecture. And also they used classical Egyptian elements or hieroglyphics and sphinxes in the architecture of the time. So the answer is Art Deco. Art Deco was the architectural style that tied India to the international architecture. Question number 4. Chandigarh was designed by B.V. Doshi, Louis I. Kahn, Le Corbusier or Charles Fourier. So Chandigarh is a union territory and a planned city in northern India, which serves as the shared capital of Punjab and Haryana. Chandigarh was planned by Swiss-French architect Le Corbusier, and it is located in the foothills of Shivalik, and it is one of the famous experiments in urban planning and modern architecture. Although Chandigarh is criticized by some people, Chandigarh is appreciated by some people. They appreciate that Le Corbusier took a bold move and did what not others were thinking of doing. However, the strict planning of Chandigarh is also criticized by a lot of researchers and prominent people. So it is one of the earliest planned cities in India, in not in India but in post-independence India, and it is internationally known for its architecture and urban design. Most of the government buildings and housing in the city were designed by a team headed by Le Corbusier, Jane Drew and Maxwell Fry. Chandigarh's capital complex, as a part of the ensemble of Corbusier's building, was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO at the 40th session of World Heritage Conference in July 2016. So the capital complex is already has been declared as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. So this is the plan of the Chandigarh. Le Corbusier divided the city into sectors, or 63, you can say 63 rectangles. The primary module of the city's design is a sector of 800 cross 1200 meter. Each sector is a self-sufficient unit having shops, health centers and palaces. And he also used he also designed planned Chandigarh analogous to a human body, in which he located the capital in the area of the head, which was the sector 1. Then heart, in heart we had city center. Then lungs were the green open spaces and the sector greens that he provided. And then the circulatory system were the different roads from V1 to V7, that the road network that he provided. And there was a hierarchy of road that was provided in the plan of Chandigarh of 7 types. From V1 was fast roads connecting Chandigarh to other towns, V2 was arterial roads, V3 were fast vehicular roads, V4 was free-flowing shopping streets, V5 was sector circulation roads, V6 was access roads to houses, and V7 was footpaths and cycle tracks. So there was a hierarchy of roads, and all these 7 roads were also considered to be the circulatory system of the plan of the Chandigarh, which was analogous to a human body. And then these were the points of the climate responsive design he did in Chandigarh. Use of parasol. Parasol is basically umbrella, means umbrella. So like you see in the image on the left side, the second image, you can see the parasol, the inverted umbrella over there. This is a shading device which was used by him. Brise Soleil is also a shading device. You can see in the images, first 2 images. These were used by Le Corbusier here. Deep overhangs and verandas, dense greenery, use of water body and roof garden. All these were the climate responsive designs that he thought of and applied in his architecture in India. So our answer is Chandigarh was designed by India. It was planned by Le Corbusier, and he also designed the capital complex of Chandigarh, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So Chandigarh was designed by Le Corbusier, and Le Corbusier was a Swiss French architect. Question 4. One image has been provided and you have to identify which building is this. Jawahar Kala Kendra Jaipur by Charles Fourier, IIM Ahmedabad by Louis I. Kahn, CEPT Ahmedabad by B.V. Doshi, and IUCAA Pune by Charles Fourier. So this is actually the image of IIM Ahmedabad. It was built in 1961 and it was designed by Louis I. Kahn. IIM Ahmedabad recognized the link between India's ancient architecture and surviving traditional brick technology and labor-intensive construction. IIM Ahmedabad was built in brick on a scale which was not possible elsewhere. It is a load-bearing structure with huge geometrical openings, which is you can say one of the styles, important styles of Louis I. Kahn, which he has also used in the assembly building of Bangladesh, the use of huge geometrical openings. So the answer is I Am Ahmedabad by Louis I. Khan. So this was it for today. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box. I would be happy to answer it. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. As far as I am aware, I'm answering to Maheshwari. As far as I am aware, it's MCQs. Because I have not given an exam on this. As far as I'm aware, it will be MCQs. I don't think it would be essay type questions. Because all the assignments that you guys have submitted is also in the form of MCQs only. If anybody has any questions regarding any of the questions I have mentioned today or any other questions from the lectures, please let me know. I will try to answer it. How to go through syllabus once again, in the sense, yeah, I'll explain that. Miss Shweta Thakur, you're asking how to go through the syllabus once again. I didn't get you. So you can, if you want to revise for it, you can go through the lectures quickly. That would help. Or you can, I think for preparing for the exam, you will have to go through the lectures again, because yeah. Also, the transcripts are provided usually along with the lectures, so you can download the transcripts and read through it. Yeah, exam dates you will be informed about. You would get email from NPTEL and they would inform you about the exam date. So coming back to Miss Maheshwari's question, the difference between Indo-Islamic and Indo-Saracenic. So Indo-Islamic architecture happened when the people from Islamic region came into India. First, it started with Delhi Sultanate. So when Delhi Sultanate was established, and what happened was, they brought in, they started, first of all, they started building, merging the vocabulary, the architectural vocabulary that was already existing in India, along with the architecture that they brought. For example, some of the mosques that existed, sometimes the mosques were built on the temples, or the temples were destroyed and then the mosques were built on it. So the walls or the columns were of the temples, but on that we used to see domes and minarets, which were a part of the, you can say, the Islamic architecture. So when Indian elements and Islamic elements were combined, it gave rise to Indo-Islamic architecture. But in Indo-Saracenic architecture, what happens is, so throughout the Delhi Sultanate, there were five dynasties in Delhi Sultanate. Indo-Islamic architecture came into being, and then Mughals came. So Mughals came from the Timurid, or you can say Timur, from the, right now it is the Uzbekistan region. Mughals came from there and they brought their own vocabularies along with them, and then they again intertwining with the existing Indian architecture, or the existing architecture in different areas, they gave roles to Indo-Islamic architecture. For example, the buildings that were constructed during those times, they had chhatris, which was a common part of Rajputana architecture. They had stone carvings, which was a part of Jain temples, intricate stone carvings. So all these things they incorporated in their buildings, and that gave rise to Indo-Islamic architecture. Now, when the Britishers came to India, they firstly they started building in the style that they were aware of, which they came from Britain. So they started building in neo Gothic styles and neo classical styles. However, they soon realized that if they want to stay in this country and stay in control of this country, they want to be able to relate with the people. So they started building an Indo-Sasanic style, in which they combined the architectural style that they brought from Britain along with the existing Indo-Islamic architecture of India. So what happens then is that to do that, what they did was the plan of the building. The plan of the building was exactly what we see in British architecture. It would be elongated plans with some outrusions, with some with grandeur, but on the elevation and on the decoration part, they would use chhatris, domes, intricate details. So the plan was of proper British style, or you can say Western idea, but the elevation or the view would be of Indian origin. So they Britishers combined the existing Indo-Islamic architecture and Indian architecture with their architecture that they brought from their country, which was at that time neoclassical and neo-Gothic. And when we combine these architecture, then we get Indo-Saracenic. So this is the difference between Indo-Saracenic and Indo-Islamic. Indo-Islamic arose, yeah, welcome. So dates हो गया, and then Shreya, you were asking when the Achaemenid Empire was Persian Empire, then how the Alexander these common architecture came into India. So Achaemenid Empire was the old Persian Empire, and their capital was Persepolis, and they were continuously in conflict with the Greek rulers at that time. So even though Persian Empire was huge and the Greek Empire was really tiny, however, when Alexander came into rule, he destroyed the whole Achaemenid Empire, whose capital was Persepolis at that time. And when he destroyed the whole thing, Alexander, he marched all the way to India. So when you come from a place to another place, you kind of bring all the knowledge or all the other things that you learn along with yourself. So this is how the architecture of West was brought into India. There was, of course, even during the Achaemenid Empire, there was exchange between the existing kingdoms in India and the Achaemenid Empire, because trade was definitely, of course, always going on. So the inspiration was always coming. And then after Alexander defeated the Achaemenid Empire and captured the whole area, he came all the way through India. So he also brought some ideas with himself. Also, when Alexander, when he defeated the Achaemenid Empire and then he won over it, so he destroyed the palaces and everything else there, because of which the only parts that survived were the columns of Persepolis. Persepolis is right now the Shiraz, the capital of Iran right now. So Persepolis, the capital of Achaemenid Empire. So only the columns were left in the palaces, because I think the superstructure was either timber or other materials which got destroyed in the war. But because the pillars and other things were stone carved, that survived. And those leftover columns, stone columns with the capital, they were a huge inspiration of what we know as the Ashokan. Ashoka borrowed a lot of architectural vocabulary from there. So Ashokan pillar that we see today, a stone pillar with a capital with lion on it, is highly inspired from the columns of the Persepolis. Okay, we have one more question. Bala Tripura Sundari. Can you please explain Art Deco once again, focusing on the buildings in India? Yeah, sure. Yeah. So you're asking about Art Deco. So I'll start from the start. So in the 20th century, India became integrated with the world along in the terms of commerce and architecture. And the architecture style that was common in Europe and America came to India. And the major styles that came into in India were the international style, the Art Deco style, and the modernist styles. And during the 1930s, art architects had this idea in their mind that they did not want to put ornaments on the building, but rather the building itself should be an ornament. So, which gave rise to the style called Art Deco. And so this happened during the time Britishers were here in the presidency towns of Bombay and Madras. So they brought along this architecture style with them, and it became a part of Indian vocabulary too. So Art Deco, what it does is that it takes inspiration from biomorphic forms or natural forms, but it applies those inspirations in geometrical form. So for example, in this Chrysler building, they take inspiration from the rays of sun, but they apply it in triangular forms to it rather than the original or the biomorphic form. And Art Deco movement is characterized by simplicity, symmetry, and repetition of elements. And one of the most important part of Art Deco is the use of streamlined architecture, which is basically streamlining, basically curved edges and other parts. So Art Deco became a notable feature architectural style in India during the British Empire. Specifically, it was used for official buildings, residences, movie theaters. For example, this is one of the official buildings, New India Insurance Buildings. So in this, you can see that they have taken inspiration from the Egyptian architecture, and that itself is the part of the building over here. So, and these are few of the architectural styles, that few of the characteristics of Art Deco that are design symbols and design styles that are common with Art Deco. So, architectural lettering, for example, the use of huge letters on buildings, ziggurats and zigzag. If you can see in this image of Eros Cinema, which was built in 1936 in Bombay, you can see the inspiration from ziggurat, from going like a pyramid, different levels up. Ziggurats, which is a feature from the I'm forgetting, Mesopotamia, I think. So all these features. Then because they used reliefs in detail inspired from old mythology. So like we see in insurance building, they used Egyptian mythology over here, but because these buildings were being constructed in India, they took inspiration of gods and goddesses from Hinduism, and they constructed reliefs inspired from them. Inspired from them, they also put reliefs like farmers are toiling, or farmers are doing their work. All these parts were elaborately added as reliefs in Indian buildings because they wanted to add a touch of regionalism in here. Then another feature which is very important was streamlining, and which is basically, it was streamlining was inspired by aerodynamics of trains and airplanes. So as the technology was growing, so these new transportation facilities were growing, the airplanes, the trains, the ships. And because that was so fascinating to the architectural style at that time, that these different transports, the inspiration was taken from those. So streamlining is basically the curving or streamlining of the edges of different kinds of transports, so that they get less friction when they are moving along in the mode of transport they're in. So this idea of streamlining was also brought in into architecture. So we don't see edges a lot in Art Deco. We see curved edges. We don't see sharp edges. We see curved edges because it was inspired from the streamlining that was happening at that time, and because it was a port city. Mumbai was a port city, so they also took inspiration from nautical design. For example, they added port windows, which is like a circular window which we see in ships if you have seen in movies and images. So those windows were present in the building. Also, again, streamlining was inspired from nautical design, and observatory towers were added because ships used to have observatory towers. So observatory towers were added in the buildings. All these things were inspired from the ships at that time. So yeah, so it was a whole design movement which included architecture, furniture, art. Everything at that time was inspired by it, and the most important part of it was borrowing inspiration from natural forms but in geometrical shapes, then borrowing from the existing transportation and streamlining the buildings, for example, inspired from trains, planes, ships, and streamlining the buildings using the features that occur in those transportations because those were kind of the highlight and hype of that time. And also, third was borrowing from old architecture and then putting them as relief on the buildings. So these were some of the features of Art Deco movement, and Mumbai is, I think, first or the second. I think it's the second city in terms of the most numbers of Art Deco buildings in the world right now. If I'm not wrong, I'll just check quickly. So yeah, this is a uh, I am Miss Shweta. I'm not sure how much the total marks of the paper will be. I am not aware of that. I think you will get all this information in the email by NPTEL. Yeah, Mumbai is actually the second most is the second city in the world to have most Art Deco buildings. The first is Miami in USA, and the second is Mumbai in India. So Art Deco architecture in Mumbai is quite famous. And Art Deco is also considered to be as not just one single style. It is also considered to be a collection of a lot of different styles. That's why we see the streamlining part also, and then use of reliefs or other kind of decoration. Like we have the in the insurance building, the use of Egyptian inspiration from Egyptian motifs. So it's a collection of all those styles together. Anyone has any other questions? Yeah, sure. I will talk about the Barabar caves in. The Barabar Hills in Jahanabad district of Bihar, it is the home to the world's oldest surviving caves. So usually rock cut architecture in India is associated with Buddhism because we have rock cut viharas and monasteries associated with Buddhism, and it's quite famous in India also. The caves and the viharas, which is associated with Buddhist architecture. However, the oldest record of rock cut architecture in India. Rock cut architecture is basically uh, cutting out space inside a rock to create space for it. So the oldest record of rock cut architecture in India is it has been found in Barabar Hills in Jahanabad district of Bihar, which dates back to the 3rd century BCE, which is 3rd century BC, 300 BCE. And in these cases, it was found that there were some chambers and there was a place, and it was believed that the Ajivika sect, which was a, I think, a nomadic religious sect, used to stay in these rock cut, in this rock cut architecture, all this, these caves. They used to, Ajivika sect used to stay in there. So it is the home to the. It's usually said that it is home to the world's oldest surviving caves because a lot of other cave structures have not survived, and it has become an international tourist destination right now. And it is this cave has multiple. It has this entire structure has multiple caves, and it has different openings also, and there are rock cut chambers in here and other than, and also it has been believed by scholars that the idea of this rock cut architecture in India came from the Achaemenid Empire, which was the old Persian Empire, because rock cut architecture uh, was a thing in there. A lot of architectural concepts have been borrowed from Achaemenid Empire. For example, the pillars and the capitals of Ashoka, and then the inscription on caves, and then stone cut architecture or rock cut architecture. All these things have been borrowed from the Achaemenid Empire to India. So it is believed that this has been also, this oldest existing cave here. It was also inspired from the Achaemenid Empire, and other traces. I'm not sure of what is the other link, but this is so far what has been known. So these Barabar caves are the oldest, we about what we know in India, oldest rock cut architecture in India, dating back to 300 BCE, before Common Era. Welcome. You're welcome. Okay, we will stay in the meeting for a while to see if anybody else